everyone? Are you here because you want to or you have to? Oh, bad question. You're going to really love this. So Phil Fenwick is a class of 1997, way back, right? Way before you were born. And his bride is a class of 1998. And so Phil has been with this company, Bailey Lumber Company, for 28 years, right out of college.
Right.
And travels internationally and is blessed to have him home here to be able to share and speak with you all. So he's got some really good, interesting things to talk about, what's going on right now in our world and how it affects many things and all of us, right, personally, right? So before I bring him up, I just want to open up in prayer, okay? Father God, we do thank you for this time that you've given us. We thank you for Phil and Jenny to be able to be here and just share what you've been doing in their lives. Father, we thank you that each and every student that is here will glean from Phil and what he shares, and that they will just be equipped even more, Father, as they are being equipped to be scholar servants, to go out in the world just like Phil has done and be that light and witness for you, Christ. So we thank you for this time. May you get all the glory and all the honor in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, Phil.
All right. Well, hello, class. I hope I can be interesting for you today. I want to start with, I'd love this to be interactive. If you got questions, thoughts as I'm going along, just jump in, throw questions out to me, please, because I'm hoping to make it interesting for you. So, now, would any of you guys ever eat scorpions or seahorses? So I've eaten the scorpions, deep fried on a stick. I chose not to eat the seahorse. Kind of look like a nice creature that I don't really want to eat. But that's Beijing, China. So I graduated in '97. As I mentioned, I've worked for this company, Bailey Group, for the last 28 years. Leaving Houghton, did I think I was going to go work for a lumber company? No. Did I think I'd travel the world? I wasn't sure, but that was something I wanted to do. But graduating from Houghton was pretty cool for that. I had done the International Business Institute. If any of you guys have seen that, or the business program is worth checking out. Gets you some really broad exposure. So I started traveling the world. I have traveled 50 different countries selling lumber. Okay, so you're wondering, selling lumber, what's that all about? Why would you go around the world? So the company that I work for, we make hardwood lumber. Red oak, white oak, cherry, maple ash, all kinds of things. I don't see much of real hardwood lumber in here, but if you guys think about your house, furniture in your house, a lot of that is made from lumber products that we will export from this country to other countries or use it in this country. So I've traveled now 50 different countries. I started out graduating from here, going to Russia, Estonia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Egypt, Israel, Greece, all places where I tried to figure out how to find new customers and sell this product. So our company exports to 100 plus countries at this point in time. And you might ask why, right? So this is, we talk about tariffs, we talk about a variety of other things. Why would we be exporting? Anybody have a question or thought about that? So they tell me, why would a company here be sending our wood around the world? Anybody thoughts?
Wood is only grown in certain places.
Right, that's part of it. What other thoughts? If we're thinking about macroeconomics, right? Because I think this is a macroeconomics class, right?
So that can be used in manufacturing in other companies, and then the product shipped back to the U.S. as
Right.
a finished product.
But why? So let's go deeper on that. Why would that be?
Because it's cheaper to manufacture overseas.
Right. So you hit on it. Does anybody know thoughts about labor rates? What about this country? Let's just talk about the U.S. for a moment. What is a normal labor rate? What would somebody make in this country? Let's just talk about that for a second, because it all kind of adds to this discussion. Anybody thoughts? What's an average wage in this country? You guys are thinking about wages soon enough. You're thinking about working for companies. What do you think you might make? Monthly wage. Anybody have a thought? Anybody? You got to be thinking money at some point. Go ahead.
Well, right now in New York, minimum wage is $15.75 maybe.
Right.
Federal minimum wage is a lot lower than that.
Right. So you're thinking about your parents, right, for a moment. Think about your parents. Think about older siblings, whatever. What could they be making today? $50,000 a year, right? Say $4,000 a month. Let's use that kind of as a baseline, right? You're making $4,000 to $5,000 a month. So now go to foreign countries, like this girl over here talked about, you know, Indonesia is a good example. Or let's go back to Vietnam. So I started traveling to Vietnam about 25 years ago. The labor rate at that time when I would go into a factory was $40 a month. So think about that. A person would work 60 hours a week, pretty ridiculous amount of hours. None of us want to work 60 hours a week. 60 hours a week to make $40 a month, right? That's a lot cheaper than it was even here, 25 years ago. Way cheaper. So that was one of the reasons. We got cheap labor, so we go to these other countries. In that example, you can see, so Indonesia is now, so Vietnam from 25 years ago to today is about $350 a month. So I was in Vietnam 3 weeks ago, visiting factories where they have thousands of workers. They're paying about $350 a month, maybe a little bit more with some overtime. That's still a lot cheaper than our $4,000 to $5,000 a month, right? So how does that happen, right? They keep finding, we're basically chasing cheap labor around the world, right? So that brings up new countries. So we've done China. China's kind of gotten high. China's maybe $600 to $800 a month now for an average laborer. This is not necessarily college educated. This is more like to your minimum wage discussion, labor type jobs. What keeps happening is we keep chasing that labor. So anybody have thoughts on where you look at your clothing, where is stuff being made today, right? Since you were a kid till now, you've watched the names change in your shirts, right? What are we seeing today? Where are we seeing things being made? Anybody have thoughts? Not as much China, right? What are we seeing? Anybody?
Taiwan.
Taiwan. Electronics, yes. 20 years ago, a lot of clothing and other stuff, but now it's moving. So where else could it be moving to today?
Oh, Bangladesh.
Correct. Cheap labor rates there. Anybody else? Thoughts?
Thailand.
What's that?
Thailand.
Yeah, right. So then we're seeing, so for our business, we're seeing Cambodia. We're starting shipping to Cambodia recently. We're seeing Pakistan. We're seeing India come around as a place that we can be sending some of our products. Argentina, Chile, some of these newer countries. Why? Because their labor rates are low. We're still going to the Taiwans for certain products. We're still going to China for certain products. As you go down the list, India, $165 to $190 a month is the factory wage. Malaysia has moved up. It used to be quite cheap. It's about $600 a month. How do these people live, right? You've got to wonder at these low rates. Well, they live in multifamily groups, right? They're 3 generations, 2 generations in a household. That's how they're surviving. But we are continuing to see, things change in this climate, right? So then I go to kind of like the how. How do we end up sending our stuff there? Anybody have thoughts? How does my product go from the U.S. to another country? Anybody have a concept for that?
A big boat.
Big boat, yes, big boat. Slow boat to China, we say, right? So with up to 5,000 containers. So that's a 40-foot metal box. So after you leave today and you're driving on the road the next time, look for these metal boxes. You didn't even necessarily know they existed, but now you will, right? So it's an 8-foot wide, 8-foot high, 40-foot box. It looks like a semi-truck, but if you look at it closely, it's just one big metal container. They call it a shipping container. So these are being shipped all over the world, right? What has happened here is we've got cheap freight from this country, right? Anybody have thought how much it cost me to ship a container from the U.S. to China today? Any concept? No concept? What is it? You know anything about trucking? Anybody understand trucking? Anybody have family members in the trucking business? Any of that kind of thing? Well, I'll give you some examples. So today, we can take a container from the United States, so from Port of New York, Port of Norfolk, Port of Charleston, Savannah, ship it to China for about $325. I don't think you can get an Uber from here to Buffalo for $325, right? Our trucking, if I were to take my truck, if I had wood here at Houghton, in Houghton land, right, and I wanted to ship it to New York City, it would cost me probably $1,700. That's crazy, right? I mean, think about that. That's crazy. We have a truck that has to go to New York City, way less miles, but we're going to put a container all the way to Asia. Anybody know why it would be so cheap going to Asia? Anybody? Thoughts? You guys ever heard of a trade imbalance? It's in the topics of the news these days. Trade imbalances. Anybody? So basically, so many containers are coming from China to the U.S., Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. with creating a trade imbalance. So they need to get those containers back. So my product is a low price, low commodity, it's a low end commodity. So they're willing to give us containers for $300, $350. On the other hand, coming back with that container full of picture frames, anything going to Target, anything going to these other companies, it's anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000. So they're making their money on the way here. It's a repositioning fee taking it back. So there again lies one of the reasons we can export. If it were $5,000 to ship it back, our wood wouldn't be quite as interesting, right? But now they're able to buy it so cheap, hit their cheap labor, and send it back. That's one of the reasons we're talking about trade imbalances today. That's part of this whole tariff discussion. It isn't just about tit for tat tariffs, but it's really about trade imbalances, currency things. So my job, let me tell you a little bit about that. So I travel to another country. I walk into a factory. Possibly they contacted me. Possibly I just saw that they do something that I think they might want my product. So I walk into that factory, ask for the boss, ask for whoever the purchasing person is, and we start talking. Mostly I'm not going to go to a clothing factory because that's not going to work, but I'm going to go to a furniture, flooring, cabinetry, those kind of companies. I'm going to walk in, I'm going to talk with them about what are you buying, what are you using for wood. Maybe they're using local wood, maybe they're using European wood, that gives me a chance, or maybe they're using US hardwoods already. I will then talk with them about similar products that I have or things that they need. So I'll give you an example. I've got a customer that's been a friend of mine now for probably 25 years, lives in Thailand, he has a big factory, he makes picture frames for Target. So if you guys were in Target anytime in the next while and you walked through their floors right there and are looking for a picture frame, which not many of us are using picture frames as much today, but if you saw black picture frames with the made in Thailand, I sold the guy that wood, right? So all over the US, that wood that's coming back, or that picture frame is made from wood from the United States that this company and I sold to them. So interesting how that kind of all spins back around. So that's companies like this guy in particular, Tira is his name. He works with Restoration Hardware, he works with Crate and Barrel, he works with Pottery Barn, he works with Rooms to Go, a lot of different things that you guys might know. Things like these picture frames to any kind of trinkety products that he would be selling. So he will have the buyer. So these are different jobs you guys can think about as you look at your life and see what you might want to do. There's buyers from these companies that now travel over. They'll meet with this guy Tira. So the same way I'm going to meet with him, they'll have a buyer from Pottery Barn. They'll have quality control people. They'll all show up. They'll be talking to him about, hey, we're looking for this product line. Have you made anything interesting that you want us to try to market? Or here's our product. So they have their own design teams. They'll come in and they will say specifically, I want this type of wood. So then Tira calls me. He says, Phil, I need this kind of wood. What's the price? What can we do? And then we think about shipping it. So how do you think that works? How do I get paid? How does all this work? You guys talked about any of that kind of stuff in your classes so far? How do you think the money flows? Anybody have thoughts? You know any ways of payments? Anybody ever heard of letters of credit? So that's a letter of credit is basically a legal document between the buyer and the seller that goes through a bank or multiple banks. So that I don't like to do because it's expensive, it's very technical. You have to cross all your T's and dot all your I's perfectly, or they may not pay you. But that's a real protective way to sell. It's called letter of credit. So we sell through letter of credit. The other way we sell is a lot more trusting. It's not a lot of fun, but I will take a deposit for you. So I might be selling you $25,000 worth of wood. I'll ask you to give me $5,000 up front so I can prepare to ship that container to you. And then 2 weeks prior to arrival, I will give you paperwork, documents that show that you own that container. So once you've paid me, I give you the documents. You can show up at customs, pay some extra fees, and clear that container from the port. At that point, you start going through it. You tell if I did a good job, bad job, you like my product, don't like my product, reorder again, those types of things. Some of the things that influence this are currencies, right? I know that's one of the topics I think you mentioned you talked about, currencies, and different levels. So when the euro is strong, our business to Europe is strong, right? So it's 1.1 euros to the dollar today. That's a fairly strong euro. That allows us to now compete with lumber coming in from Russia, not as much today, but Russia, Ukraine, Serbia, any of these other countries, Hungary, that would be competing with some of the products that I sell. as the euro is stronger, they can buy my product a little bit cheaper. So therefore, I can now export to Europe. Those currency things also mess around in Asia, and that's going to be part of the topic today as well, which is Asia sometimes fixes currencies, okay? So that's one of the things we're talking about. Our president, one of the things he's talking about, currency manipulation. Often China is doing what we view as currency manipulation. They're holding the value of their currency fairly low so that their products are easier to buy, right? Because if their currency went up, you'd be less likely to buy these little trinkets or even your iPhone or anything else if their currency was too high. In some cases, when these countries have had problems, they'll fix their currency. So during my career, I had Malaysia. I was doing a lot of business with Malaysia. They went through some bad currency crisis. Some older people in the room will remember the Asian currency crisis that we've been through. They fixed their currency at 3.8 Malaysian ringgit to the dollar. So that was at least something stable. They could actually figure out how to do business, how to keep business flowing. Today it's actually 4.4, so it's weakened quite a bit, right? It's 4.4 ringgit to the dollar, which makes it harder to do business in a country like that. A lot of these currencies also have seen massive inflation. So Vietnam would have inflation as much as 20%, right? Anybody know what our inflation has been in the last couple of years? You may have talked about that in your classes, as we look at the inflation indexes. Professor, any thoughts? What's inflation rates been for the U.S. for the last couple of years? Get close, we don't have to get it right.
6%?
Yeah, sort of like 6%. So compare that, and we're screaming about that, right? Nobody's happy about that. Nobody wants to pay more for ice cream, milk, any of your daily necessities. What happens when we hit 21%? That's pretty bad, right? I mean, especially when you're making so little money, you're buying that much less with this inflation. So these are all kind of challenges that we deal with. For me, one of the things that I have to do is try to find products that match up with the customer. So I'm trying to find something that matches. So I will go into a factory in here, New Zealand pine, or Tata pine out of Chile. So I've got these two things. I have to look through my arsenal of products and say, oh wait, southern yellow pine, something made in Georgia, something made in North Carolina, something made in Tennessee. I might be able to sell to them. Find the price, find out what kind of quality might work, and potentially start that type of business. Back to some of the names. So again, we talked about some of these names of furniture companies. Most everybody you see with furniture and clothing and so many products are being made abroad, right? You guys are seeing that. I mean, we're not making nearly as much as we once made here. This is one of the discussions for how we've gotten to tariffs. So in Trump's first term, my company got hit with tariffs. Okay, my customers got hit with tariffs. There was 25% tariff put on our products. So if you think about that, that just made everything I'm selling that guy $25 more. Every dollar went to $1.25, right? You guys are following that? And you definitely are hearing the news, tariffs. You're definitely hearing, these different numbers. Anybody following the numbers for this last week? It's been a little chaotic in my world. Have you followed many of the numbers? Are you watching what's been going on? Anybody thoughts? What's been happening? What are you seeing tariffs like?
Isn't it like 105% on China?
Right, you're pretty close, yes. Yeah, it's about 104 on that. It's actually higher than that because they're not adding in the 25% from Trump's first term that's still hanging out there. They're just talking about the new stuff, but it's actually 25% higher than that on a lot of their products. But back to the first tariff. So we need to keep selling our products, right? This is because you got to think about this is going to be globally, right? So just my company, we have to keep selling our products. How are we going to sell them if it's now 25% more? Well, customers talking to us, what can you do to help us? We're looking, saying, what can we do? Our margins are not high in the lumber business. I mean, our margins are 8, 10% in that kind of range. How are we going to eat 12.5% on a substantial amount of business that we do? So we ended up, at that period of time, having to split the tariff with the customer. So we reduced our price 12.5%. They had to pay 12.5% more, and we were able to keep doing business. So we took a huge loss, right? I mean, that's not nice. That's 40+% of the business that we do. Made that year pretty challenging. The difference was, a year later, China got all theirs back, okay? So all the factories in China that paid that tariff, they got 25% back. Wait a second, they only paid 12.5. I paid another 12.5, but they got that money back. That's some of the stuff that's coming out when we talk about this trade imbalance, these tariffs. these kind of things. Any questions, thoughts? Following along?
Yeah.
Good, good. Anybody questions so far on what I'm talking about? No? Yes?
Yeah, so does your company, does it also do like the logging and milling of wood? Or do you have a different company that you pay to like get the logs and mill and then you ship that? Or like how does that work?
Yeah, no, it's great. So we own sawmills. We don't own much land, but we mostly own sawmills where we will buy from standing timber, we call it. So we'll come to your family's owned land. You may have had a forester come to your place. They'll walk through, you'll tell them, I really just want to sell cherry, maple, ash. So that forester will come through, he'll choose the trees, and he'll talk to you and say, hey, I'm willing to sell those trees. They'll give you a price, and then a logging crew would come in and collect those logs, right? So that's standing timber. We do something called gate wood, which you might cut it down yourself. You show up at one of our factories, we'll measure the size, tell you how much volume of lumber that would be, and then we will buy that from you at that point. So those are the two ways it gets to a sawmill. Then the sawmill cuts it up, right? So we saw it. We have a place in Owego, New York, Houghton, New York, Smyrna, New York. We have about 22, so I don't want to go through the list of those. But all over the East Coast. So we cut the lumber, then we dry the lumber, we grade it, so we figure out which quality it is. So there's multiple qualities. Some of it, the lower end stuff, stays in the US. Things like pallets, lumber for pallets, lumber for crane mats. You've probably seen some of those around, or maybe you will after I talk about this. These are big, looks like blocks of wood that are linked together. It's for heavier equipment, so if they're going to run across some land that might be wet, they'll put these down ahead of time so the bulldozer or the crane can go across. Those are called crane mats. That's a very important part of any lumber business. And then you have railroad ties. So that's the best one for us, is the center of the log. We cut into a railroad tie. A lot of those get sent to big companies that are going to buy those from us. Those are only 9 feet long, 8 and 9 feet long, and they're going to be pressure treated. That's why they become black, so it doesn't really matter what the wood is. They're going to make that black. They're going to make it with probably a bad chemical called creosote, so it doesn't deteriorate, and that's what you're going to see. They're replacing on railroad lines. So we kiln dry the lumber, then we package it, and then we try to figure out who we want to sell it to. So from domestic companies here that are doing millwork, flooring, a lot of foreign companies. So, other questions? It's going to keep this more interesting the more questions we get, guys. So if anything you've got, bring it out. Let's talk about tariffs a little bit. There's a very interesting, how to explain it? A very interesting smuggling ring that happened when you guys were quite a bit younger. So in 2012, I tell the story about this smuggling ring that was happening in Buffalo. Okay, so it was called white gold. Any idea what they might have been taking across the border?
Milk?
Close, close. Why? Let's go deeper on that. Why would you think milk? What have you heard?
It's white and it's, I don't know.
So have you guys heard anything about the tariffs that Canada has had on the U.S. for a long time? So it has nothing to do with the recent stuff, but it's been in place for a long time. Any thoughts? You hit on it close. So I was a kid. We would drive to Canada. My father's from Canada. My grandmother still lived in Canada. We'd drive to New Brunswick. Every time we got to Maine, we would stop. And we'd buy milk. Why? Dad, why are we buying milk? We'd buy milk. Well, it's a lot cheaper here. We'd buy milk, go across the border, stay at my grandmother's house because I drank a lot of milk. Milk, cheese, butter, right? Never really understood why. Until later I started to hear, oh, they have tariffs against us on milk, cheese, and butter. Any thoughts how much? Been in the news a little bit lately, but it's also, pretty interesting. 200 to 300%. Why? Why would they have a tariff in place? Anybody thoughts? This is a deeper discussion we need to get into about this. Why would they have tariffs? Go ahead.
Because there's quite a lot of milk production and dairy farms in Canada, so they want to protect their own supply there.
Okay, good. Go deeper. Why? There's deeper why.
Do they have more regulations on how these dairy farms can be run?
Probably a little bit of that, but think deeper about protecting. What are you protecting?
Well, you're protecting the domestic businesses.
Right.
And making sure that they have a market for their products in the same country that they're produced in.
Right, right. So they've maybe even fixed the floor pretty high, right? So in a free trade economy, you might have, like, I know some farmers, they sell milk, at bad times it's $12 per hundredweight. So 100 pounds of milk goes for $12. That farmer's not surviving on that, right? They're really, really happy when it gets to $15. Still think about that. A gallon is 8 pounds, right? So do the math back on that and see how many gallons. So imagine you guys buy milk or grab milk when you're home for your parents or whatever, and you see we can still get milk pretty cheap, right? $3 to $5 a gallon, right? Depending on whether we're getting organic or pasture raised or whatever it is we're getting, or just regular milk. So $12 to $15 a hundredweight is pretty pathetic, right? Canada's blocked the price. So they've made it so our cheap milk can't go in there and mess up their farms, okay? But what happens when we throw a tariff back on them? They start complaining right away, right? But I live in Buffalo, just outside of Buffalo, and I'm shopping for my family of 6 boys. One of them sitting in the room over here, by the way. So I'm shopping at Sam's Club or something, and there's all these Ontario cars there. And you might notice I like to talk. I'll talk to some of these people occasionally, and I'll see their cart is full of milk. Well, they're getting their daily allotment, right? I mean, you guys have all traveled a little bit, right? When you come across the border, you've seen, where you land. They ask you what duty-free items you have, right? Have you guys, any of you traveled overseas and had, they're questioning whether you have things that probably none of you had in there, liquor and cigarettes, but other products that they're looking for closely because they want to see whether you've paid the tax on them. So they allow you a certain amount in without that tax, which is why people are buying, right, at these duty-free shops. They're buying it because it's cheaper. It hasn't had the tax, the duty, the VAT, value-added tax, added to it. So these people, like I was most of my life, were carrying milk across the border because we're getting it for $2 a gallon, and it's $6 a gallon or $5 a gallon. So back to the white gold. We're very close. It was mozzarella cheese. So there were police officers. You can look this up. It's a pretty interesting story. There were police officers from Canada that were smuggling boxes of cheese across the border. Okay? So think about this. Police officer is driving across with his family or whatever. He's got a box of cheese in the back. He paid $1,000 for it. Okay? He could sell it now worth $3,000. He sells it for $2,000. He doubled his money. That's a pretty good gig. It's not heroin. It's not cocaine, right? He's like, it's just cheese. But I can only imagine that guy going to prison and then looking at the guy next to him and say, what are you in for? Oh, I killed 2 people. What are you in for? Mozzarella cheese. Right? I mean, I think that's a little bit of a hard one. But you can see how, it even affects down to these smaller things where having tariffs, having value-added taxes play into it. I was going to talk a little bit about like cars. So we got a lot of foreign cars in this country. But are they foreign, right? Are they foreign or aren't they foreign? We had the, I think it was 1993, the NAFTA, right? North American Free Trade Agreement. Our President Bill Clinton signed the NAFTA. And that was probably, a little bit of opinion, okay? That was probably the beginning of a downfall toward this additional globalization, right? Where we're benefiting these major corporations by having cheaper labor elsewhere, right? So by making the border open with Canada and the border open with Mexico, you just killed Michigan, you killed Buffalo, you killed a lot of these cities where a lot of automotive industry was made. Why? Because that big company, Ford, GM, whoever, is now going to make some of their parts and some of their cars in Mexico or in Canada because they're bringing it across without any tariffs or duties. So recently, Trump put the 25% against all cars. This is a little challenging, right? Because now it's gone back and forth. Parts have gone across the border. It's been open for so long. But that's one of the things that, if you kind of look back, may have led to the demise of our auto industry in this country. Whereas these other countries have actually built plants in our country, right? So Toyota, there's plants here. Mercedes, there's plants. BMW, there's plants. But we don't sell a lot to their countries with our cars. Not much at all. Go to Japan, you hardly see an American car. Well, partly it's they're very nationalistic, right? They want their cars. I can't say the Japanese cars aren't better in a lot of ways than some of the American cars with regard to quality, right? I mean, what cars survive the longest on the roads? The Hondas and the Toyotas, right? I mean, imagine a bunch of you are driving Hondas and Toyotas because your parents are like, these are efficient cars that last forever. VAT is the problem when you go to Japan. They add 10% VAT. Germany's another example. You don't see US cars in Germany, hardly at all. Why? Again, 10% tariff and a 19% value-added tax. So you've really got a challenge in that. You're not going to buy that car, if it's a $20,000 car or $50,000 car or $50,000 car today. If you have to pay 29% more for the US-made one, you're probably going to buy the German-made one or an EU. Now it's not just going to be Germany; it's going to be an EU because they've linked. So it's not just Germany. The whole European Union has the ability to trade within itself without paying these fees that, for us to play in their game, we have to play. So, my world today. Beginning of the week, Trump decided to do, last week, decided to do a 34% tax on China, right? On top of 20% that was already there. I've got containers, lots and lots of containers, headed to China. Several hundred, closer to 1,000 containers between myself and others on my team that sell to China. So we're looking at tens of millions of dollars worth of product, and now we're wondering, are we going to get paid? We only have a small deposit, right? We've got $3,000 to $5,000 deposit. That was the other way I talked about paying. We have a lot of customers like that. We have some customers we've been doing business with for a long time. We have no deposit, right? Wow, what are we going to do? We're going to start jumping through hoops, right? So we're starting to look at what are our options. What do we do with this wood that's in boxes, metal boxes, headed there? And luckily, unluckily, beginning of March, China banned log shipments from the United States. So we've had about a month to play with some of the problems already. So a month ago, we got hit with China saying no logs to China. That was a little bit of their reciprocal, my view again, reciprocal to Trump's fentanyl discussion, right? Because in my view, fentanyl is very subjective. It's hard to quantify how much fentanyl is coming in and from where. And China's retort, or their quid pro quo, was to ban all logs because they said there's bugs in them. Again, very obscure, right? Hard to understand. So we've now got hundreds and hundreds of containers headed to China that if they didn't get there by a certain date, which was coming up, we can't enter the country, right? So we are forced to find other customers around the world for those logs. So I've got hundreds of containers that I'm redirecting to Vietnam. I'm talking to my customers there saying, hey, can you take this, can you take this? Messing up our business a little bit. But that's what's happening. So at this point, we start the week with 34% tariffs. We start discussing internally what we're going to do about that, how we're going to, I've been having team meetings every day, with my team. So I was in China 2 weeks ago. I have a team of 28 people that work the China market. There's 4 other guys like me in the US, and then 20 plus Chinese that are our local salespeople. So I talk with them every day. We've got some interesting names in my group. So I just, I don't know if you know how this works sometimes, is they pick American names. So I've got a guy named Echo. So I've got Echo on my team. I've got a lady named 11, and that was because 7 was taken already. She was working for a company with like 13,000 people, and when she looked through the computer database, there were already 30 people with the name 7. So there were only a few people with the name 11, so she chose that name. No idea. And then I have a Hannah. So these are my team. I travel with them and talk with them daily. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with these problems, right? So they started talking to their customers with this log crisis. What can we do? So they talk to customers in their factories that they know in Vietnam and other countries to say, can we redirect it? So now I've got containers on the way to China. As soon as they hit the port there, I have to talk to the steamship line about either unloading them, reloading them, or redirecting that container. So these are all additional fees, right? I mean, that's not cheap. That's $1,000 per container to change the destination, and then whatever the difference is in freight. So again, things that you have to think about as people that are getting hit with tariffs. Everybody, from both sides, is dealing with how to redirect it, how the extra fees are, these kind of things. And then often selling at a fire sale, right? Some kind of discounted price because they know there's blood in the water. There's something there's a crisis at hand. So they're going to be asking you for discounts. Now, it's China. Again, opinion. They're finding ways to circumvent most of these things, right? So we're already hearing stories of, hey, ship it to this country, we'll do a little bit to it, and we can ship it back because we'll change the origin, right? Ship it to Vietnam, we'll adjust it. That's another thing that our administration currently is watching carefully, because throughout my career there have been anti-dumping. Do you guys know what that means? Anti-dumping? That's another part and parcel with this tariff discussion. When we talk about anti-dumping. Anybody thoughts on what that is? Yes?
Isn't that when you dump chemicals into
No. This is that's not in this regard. I get where you're going with that, but no, anti-dumping. Go ahead.
going to offload all your stuff in another country at a cheap price?
Right, but why? What would be the issue? What are you doing wrong? What is somebody doing you doing wrong?
You're just taking advantage of them, like, you're gonna just charge them a bulk price to get rid of your stuff.
Okay,
You get to pay a lot to get rid of it.
So, anti-dumping, let's go deeper in that. So anti-dumping really has to do with, are you showing us your true costs? Right? Or is the government subsidizing you? Are they kicking money to your back? Right? So you look like you can sell something cheaper, but you really can't. Are you selling at a loss? That's really what it comes down to, right? That would be called anti-dumping. So China has historically and had some rebates that they'll give back to their factories if they export. But that meant he could make it way cheaper than you could. You got a factory in the US, you got a factory in China. You know he's selling for $10 a piece, you come in at $8, right? You're gonna kill his business, right? You're killing his business because you're at $8, he's at 10. Well, you can go to the US government, Congress and House of Representatives and have some discussions and talk about fair trade, and that's where this anti-dumping comes in. Because they're gonna be able to go back, and what has happened in my industry, like bedroom furniture, boring topic, right, bedroom furniture. But bedroom furniture was being subsidized in China so that they could bring it in way cheaper, and then all of a sudden the US manufacturers can't manufacture it, nor could anybody else around the world at a reasonable price. So then the US government goes after them, they say, hey, you're doing anti-dumping. I have an interesting story on that topic, so I've got one customer I've had for a long, long time. You have to be able to fill out paperwork, right? So he's factories in China, he needs to fill out paperwork for this anti-dumping, right? If you don't get this paperwork right, it's 198% tax against you, right? Wow, sounds a lot like stuff that Trump's doing today, right? But there's 198% tax if you don't get it right. So I have this one customer, he's gotten good at English, he's gotten good at figuring it out, and he applied for 5 different companies. One company got 17% tax, one company got 19, one he got 25, roughly these numbers. Got a friend down the road with a huge factory, thousands of workers, $50 million in sales. He fills it out wrong, he gets 198% tax. So he goes to my friend, who some of these were just shell companies, some of these were just names, right? He filled it out so he'd have the ability. And these 2 other factories kept calling him all the time. Thomas, can you sell us one of your names? I don't want to sell any names. Sell us one of your names, sell us one of your names. So he gets, finally the guy says, I'll give you $500,000 just for the name. I need to apply it to my company. So he sold 2 of those for $1 million. So that company could now use that name, bring it into their company and get that 17% tax instead of 198. Other companies couldn't figure that out. So what did they do? They moved, right? So that's why you see this movement to cheaper labor areas. So right now, lots and lots of Chinese guys are in Vietnam. They've been trying to find all the factories they can there to be able to continue to have their business to the US and other countries, but have a lesser tax tariff, these kind of rates. I was in Indonesia 4 weeks ago. So last month I was gone 3 weeks of the month traveling. I was in Indonesia, and there were plane load after plane load of Chinese businessmen arriving, just trying to find factories, trying to find places to prepare for manufacturing with this trade war kind of in effect. Anybody thoughts on trade wars? I know you. Lucas.
Hello.
Hey. Hey, I'm gonna start calling on you.
I don't know a whole lot about it, but I watched a YouTube video and they said that the tariffs aren't necessarily the end or the means to the end of Trump trying to negotiate trade deals instead of just outright kill business. He wants to, you know, keep the business in the US, and to do that, he's just gonna put that huge number on there to scare everyone, and then say, well, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, you're killing everybody. Which is, you know, his deal, you know.
Right. But he had a book, right? I think it was called Art of the Deal. Maybe part of some people's reading here and there. I think, you know, is it Art of the Deal? Anybody know?
That's it.
Yeah, Art of the Deal, right? So Trump's just a deal maker. Like him, hate him, doesn't matter. I don't know if I like him or hate him either, right? Just an interesting guy, right? Don't know if I want to be friends with him. I'd probably like to talk to him a little bit just to understand his brain, but crazy guy, right? So he's going big and hard, to your point. And you see what happens. Just yesterday, after we had more discussions about this extra 50% that got us up to 84% against my products, he said, oh wait, hold on, 90 days, I'll only give you 10%, everybody but China, right? He's doing exactly what we were talking about. He's negotiating, right? He's playing for the best deal. Anybody know some things that have occurred since these tariff discussions started? Go ahead.
Didn't China up their stuff up to like 80%?
Yep, 84%. So they're going, you know, we're gonna fight, we'll fight back, right? You're up, we're up. They're not quite as high as us, but they both came up. What other stuff has happened for the US? Go ahead.
Oh, I know U.S. also charged tariffs on Ghana. So.
Right. Lots of countries,
Yeah.
lots and lots of countries have tariffs on them. We're going to this about, you know, what has occurred so far since discussions, right? It's one of their talking points. We don't hear a lot about, but it's an interesting one. Anybody hearing about companies that are talking about investments in the U.S.? Anybody hear about that? See that? Lucas, you're shaking your head. What do you know?
Oh, a bunch of car manufacturers, like you were talking about moving plants to America so that American workers could get American wages, but they're still making they're still making the car parts for the cars. So instead of assembling them in the other country and then shipping them, they would be made in the U.S.
Right.
to avoid.
Right. So we've heard Apple, I think it was a $500 billion investment they're talking about for one of their new plants. That's been in discussion. I don't know more details. I think it was Taiwan Semiconductor was offering like a $1 trillion investment into the U.S. for, so somehow, I didn't add them all up, but I think it was about $3 trillion worth of future, again, it still has to happen, but future investment that we've actually heard since Trump started that will likely be coming to the U.S. Does that offset this tariff stuff and the pain that we're going to feel? I don't know. Again, all speculation. But it's interesting to see that some of this is starting to come back around. Anybody else thoughts? Yes?
So you kind of mentioned it before, but I was just wondering if you had to deal a lot with like invasive beetles and bugs and stuff, because a lot of that is through like wood. So I don't know like what your cautions are.
Oh, great question, great question. Please, keep bringing questions. I want to keep this interesting for you guys. But bugs, so there's a bug called the emerald ash borer. So if any of you guys have ash trees in your yard, right? Yeah, tell me what happened.
They'll die.
Right. So this bug gets under the bark, whatever its larvae is, whatever it lays its eggs, gets under the bark, and it eats the layer that actually feeds the tree, right? It eats the cambium is what it's called. The layer where the fluid, the water goes up and down. So why your trees are gonna, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, start to turn green, right? Because it starts drawing the water up. That's how we get maple syrup at this time of year, because it's sucking the water up and that tree's full of water. But if that bug, which loves ash, eats its way around, you know, if you took the bark off, or when you find a dead tree in your yard that was ash, you're gonna see these tracks underneath, which stop the flow. It's like cutting off your arteries, right? Going up to, you know, so you don't have nutrition. So that, the emerald ash borer is a big one, and that came from China, right? So that's one of the reasons China's stopping now, is because we're sending emerald ash back to them. Emerald ash borer back to them. It came from them, we're sending it back. So that's one of the reasons they stopped the logs recently. And you can see, sad to say, you can see deforestation around those ports where those logs come into, because the borer got out and is destroying them. So yes, so we have things like, on logs, they fumigate them. Pretty horrible process. You know, put some chemical in the container, supposed to kill all the bugs. On my wood, just heating it past a certain temperature for a certain duration of time is supposed to kill the larvae, the eggs, anything that could be in the wood, right? So then we have something called from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we have something called a phytosanitary certificate, okay? So that's a piece of paper that I get with each one of my shipments that I send along, that the customs and probably environmental organizations that are receiving the container for my customer look at, and they have to see that it was heat treated for a certain period of time to ensure that that has happened. But yeah, good question. Good question. Other questions, thoughts? Yes?
How do language and cultural barriers affect your work?
Ooh, that's a great one. That's a great one. So, China. Again, I love China, but it's a goofy place, right? I'll tell you about a dinner. Just last week, I go to dinner. And it's usually a round table in a room. I had 5 different companies, so I had representatives from 5 companies. I had my team, I had a couple competitors, so we're all friendly competitors there. They want to hear my view on the markets. They want to hear my view on the world. I come walking in the room, and I take a seat over here. Okay, you gotta pay attention where the door is, just so I'm giving this example. I take a seat over here. No, 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 no. Laoban, Laoban. Big boss, they're saying to me. Laoban, Laoban. You have to sit here. No, 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 I'm not the big boss. You sit there. Stupid game we play every time I'm in China, right? Why? For whatever reason, the guy that sits and looks at the door is the boss. I have no idea why, but this is a game that they play every single time I go to China, right? And I have to play that game with them. I try to put their boss over there, and they try to put me there. It's just some interesting cultural stuff. Food, right? Talk about cultural differences. I went to that same restaurant where I was called Laoban, sitting in front of the door. It's basically a pet store. Do you guys know that? You know most Chinese restaurants are pet stores? Higher-end Chinese restaurants, not fast food. It's basically like walking into a pet store. Anybody experienced this? Have you seen this? I want to look it up on YouTube sometime. I have videos. I'm sorry I didn't put them, bring them to put up. I probably should have. It's aquariums, tanks of frogs, snakes, turtles, scorpions, every kind of fish that you can imagine, every kind of sea life that you can imagine, every type of part that you would never eat in this country. So last week I had something I didn't know what it was. I kind of knew what it was. It was a sheep stomach with sheep mutton wrapped inside of it. Didn't taste horrible. It was okay. I didn't choose the pig rectum. That was on the menu. I knew what that was, and he asked, would you like that? Probably not today. I prefer not that one. So yeah, it's just different cultural, different foods. For me, smoking is a real pain in the butt. I get in a room, and I'm like, I don't like smoke. I'm not a smoker. And there's 5 guys in the room smoking. This is a challenge. Like, I have to have a happy face, because we've been blessed in this country, you might say. You guys are all too young to remember restaurants where people were smoking. It's not a lot of fun if you're not a smoker sitting in that room. And I'm now a chain smoker for the next 2 hours. The tea is an interesting thing. You have to know how to play that game of having tea. Language, though. Let's go to the language. Language is definitely can be a challenge, but that's one of the reasons, like in China, I have my team that I handpicked, I hired over the last many years that travel with me. They kind of know what I'm expecting. They understand our products. They come here and travel with us. So that's made that situation a lot better. There are definitely cultural challenges with yes when it doesn't mean yes, right? I mean, there's in the Asian culture, there's a lot of face. You have to talk about face, right? I mean, you don't disrespect somebody because they will be upset with you. It's a face issue. Yeah, I've traveled all over the world, and I used to work in Egypt, and one of the challenges was the negotiation was never done. I'd sit down. I remember going to this one factory, meeting with a guy. He's traveled with me in the U.S. Now we're going to sit and do business, and we got there. I got there at noon because they don't usually work till about noon. They usually sleep in and then they work late. But at noon, we negotiated, discussed, went through lots of products. Okay, you're going to order a whole bunch from me. About 4 or 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock maybe. Let's order some food. He orders pizzas, horrible pizzas. He orders pizzas and all kinds of weird stuff on it that I wasn't excited by, but we ate that. Then we negotiate for another 2 or 3 hours. I'm like, I thought I was done negotiating, right? He wants to negotiate again. I was like, oh man, I went too far. I gave too low a price already. Now we're negotiating again. Then we go out to dinner. We came back. I was in that guy's office till 1:30 discussing, these different prices. So every culture has a little bit of their different way. And they used to, this factory specific, this customer specifically, would put me in a room with one of his brothers. It was 4 Christian brothers. So weird situation. He'd leave me in this room with a guy that didn't actually speak any English, but he had one good phrase: cheaper price. So the whole time he would just look at me and say, cheaper price. I said, do you speak any other English? No, cheaper price. Cheaper price. So this was like, they're just going to taunt me for an hour as they negotiated and discussed. So lots of different cultural stuff. And then, so then now Christianity comes into it. Let's go into deeper, right? You guys are pretty mature at this point. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in the world. It sucks to be a businessman. Sorry, it does. Like, wait, I'm here to sell you products. No, I don't want to sit with some lounge singer girl. Keep her out of here. They like karaoke. Karaoke's not the way you think it is. I just sang a lot. I don't even like to sing. I just sang a lot. Because they brought girls in the room. What? We're going to sing. No, they bring in pretty girls. Dude, I'm not into this. Like, I don't want this. So I just kept singing the whole time. Right? This girl's trying to feed me. I'm like, please leave me alone. This other girl is trying to give me drinks. I'm like, I don't drink. Just leave me alone. And finally, I was able. The one spoke enough English. I was able to make a deal. I said, hey, listen, I'll give you a good tip. Don't touch me, please. The other one, I just had to keep hitting her until she stopped touching me. Sorry, it doesn't sound nice, but I kept nudging her away. I don't like this. Never went out with that guy again. Next time he said karaoke, I was like, oh, I have a Teams meeting tonight. Right? Didn't know my first trip. Was really mad at my colleagues that knew about that stuff. I did not know. Right? Always somebody looking to do something illegal, right? Hey, can you make the document a little cheaper, right? You sold it to me for $1,000, but can you make the paperwork only say $500 so I pay lower taxes on this? No, dude, I can't. Call your boss. I can't. Call your boss. Yeah, he said no. They get mad at you. You know what? I have great things in my life. I have a choice. I don't have to sell you. I don't have to sell that guy. Like, I could choose who I sold. Right? And so sometimes that was at my own peril. Like, I'm losing sales because I'm not willing to pay, a commission under the table or do these kind of things. And this is the challenge in the business world, guys and girls here. This is the challenge, right? The world's not clean and clear. There's a lot of corruption. We're seeing it in our own government, right? We're seeing it everywhere. So this kind of thing, you're going to be challenged by as, Christian men and women going out into the business world. It's not fun, right? My wife's here in the room. I told her everything. I'm like, I need to tell you all this stuff because this is a crazy place over here. It can be dangerous. So early on, I started taking it with me, right? So my son Ryan over here has been in Asia. First 3 years of his life, 100 days a year he was with me because I was traveling at that time probably about 150 days a year to all these different countries. So I had the benefit of being able to bring my family along quite a lot of the time. Made my life a lot better, helped my relationship with my customers because I'm like, here's my wife, right? She's right here. Don't ask me about any of this hanky-panky weirdness that you guys are into that I'm not, right? I could stick to my guns on that. You also have a chance to talk about faith time by time, right? As you build relationships with some of these people, I sat with so many Buddhists that I got to learn about what they believe, what they think, and I got to share with them. Like, a funny one. My joke was, man, it took Buddha 99 tries to get to enlightenment. I just have to ask Jesus one time, right? And he kind of looked at me funny and said, ponder on that for a little bit. So we did have some opportunities to, there are opportunities along there to have deeper relationships, but, international business is a little challenging in those regards. Other questions? Anything? Open. Yes?
Do you guys have, as a company, regrowth plans to fill in trees? I know you have private customers. Do you encourage them to plant more trees, or do you have programs to plant trees?
Great question, great question. So, U.S. hardwoods, East Coast hardwoods, so we're mostly talking about everything on the East Coast. So, Mississippi over hardwoods, okay? So I'm talking about hardwoods primarily. The greatest thing about hardwoods is, go out here anywhere. Go in the woods, one of these, up by a ropes course or somewhere here. Look at a big tree. Look on the ground. What's on the ground around it? You may not know. Those are all little trees waiting to come up, okay? We don't have to plant those trees as long as you selectively harvest, right? So what we call selectively harvesting. We go into the forest, we choose trees that are a certain diameter based on customer preference, but also we don't want little trees. We need the big trees. And if you understand, if you've taken biology classes or stuff over your years, you know the life cycle of things, right? So you want to get it at the top of the life cycle. You want a tree that's a certain diameter, that's probably as mature it's gonna get, because I have a forest. I look at my forest, I'm not doing a good job of cutting it down, but you know, those trees are starting to die as they go over the period of time, right? And the second that tree comes down, look at how fast that forest comes up. They're all those little trees are waiting to catch the sunlight. So the great news is we don't have to replant on the East Coast. Now, if we clear cut, which I hate, but some areas do it more to the south, like southern yellow pine. If you see all the trees that are perfectly in a line everywhere in a forest, that's probably pine, right? It's gonna always be green, so that's an evergreen southern yellow pine. Those, they will thin, so they plant them. It's more of a cash crop. It's almost like a corn crop in a sense, right? So you're going in, they clear every third tree, then they clear every second tree, and allow them to get big and clear and tall. But then you'll see within 20 years, they clear that to the ground. Those they do replant, right? Same thing on the West Coast. When they do harvesting, they replant most of that. I answer your question? All right. Other questions? Somebody's got to have- Yes?
So with everything going on this past week, where, in your business, where are you?
Very confused. So the answer is very confused. So actually, we're in a holding pattern because there's some other rules that have fallen in play, right? So you have to be watching every bit of news. Like I hate the news, but I have to watch it now all the time to understand where we stand, right? So earlier this week, I was at 34%. We were contemplating, do we give a little discount to encourage them to keep taking it? Because they're going to be the only guys in the market that have that product if everybody stops, right? So a little bit more about my China business, right? So to answer your question, we're selling to factories and we're also selling to what we call distributors. People who are going to buy my wood, they're going to hold it, they're going to find people that want that wood, and they're going to mark it up. So as soon as the first tariff hits, they raise their prices. Why not, right? To replace it, the replacement cost is that much higher. So again, the 34%, they raise their price 10%. Well, that makes it more interesting for my other customers because they look at it and say, okay, well, if they went up 10, now I'm only off 14%, right? But this 50 added on to it and everything else is pretty much sending it sideways. But the US has a rule that says cargo on the water, I just read it yesterday, basically cargo on the water that was already on the water before a tariff was hit only gets hit with a 10% tariff. So there's some clause that's out there. So if China follows that, we'll be in a better position than we are. We won't have nearly as many containers that we have to redirect. But that's the problem is it's a game time decision. Things could change every minute. So at this point, we're looking at shipping to Vietnam. So I'm calling on my friends and contacts in Vietnam to say, hey, if I'm jammed up, who can take this? I know I'm probably gonna have to take a little discount. Do you have a warehouse? So one of the things we're thinking about is if this trade war is not gonna last that long, we might warehouse material with the intent of, yeah, we're gonna have costs in it, but we're gonna be able to then resell it, hopefully at a higher price, or resell it with a lesser loss in the future. We are actually dragging back containers. So I have material at the port right now that was destined for China. As much as it hurts me, it's like $5,000 a container. We're bringing it back to our factories if it's a high value enough product that we don't think we can find another customer for it. So for me, last couple days, that's one of the things I've been doing is going through lists of my orders and others to try to see what do I think I can sell easily in Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, or what do we think we should really bring back because it'll be the least painful. So that's where we're at today in this situation. And again, it's changing minute by minute. So we may end up with all that wood still going to the original customer because the sailing time is closer to 40 days. So we have a little bit of time. The window that the tariffs start hitting in China is May 17th. The window that we have in the US right now is, I think it was May 23rd, 23rd or 27th, that we wouldn't have additional tariffs actually hit those products. So, other questions? Don't have to be just on tariffs. Yes?
Are there like certain seasons you ship containers, or is it kind of random? As soon as you have orders come in, do you ship them? Or?
Yeah, we pretty much are shipping all the time, right? We're shipping several thousand containers every month, all over the world. You know, half of our business is domestic, half of our business is international. With the benefit being that we've got a bunch of Middle East business these days, right? So that's been a good area for us. keep getting some new business, right? Australia recently is an interesting one. They had a lot of their own wood, but their country banned cutting of their own wood. So they've been spending a lot of time in the US trying to figure out what matches up, what could possibly be a replacement, and they've taken some big positions on that. So, yes?
As far as like the future of your business, are you kind of waiting to see if the tariffs last? Or like, and like if they would last, would you then consider like doing more domestic work or like, yeah, in the US?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect question, and that's a really hard one to know, right? I mean, like, my heart hurts for my team in China, because I know they're gonna make less money, right? And at what point, what's the deal? How long does this last? I mean, COVID was a little bit like this, right? We had, I mean, if you go to COVID stopped a lot of our business because there wasn't anybody buying the product here, and therefore the customers were saying, hey, stop. So the tariff isn't just hurting the customers that are buying my product, it's the customer that buys my product wanting to reship. So one of the ways that I'm winning right now is that Vietnam, a lot of the wood that I send to Vietnam ends up as a finished product in Europe. So they have a different relationship, they don't have a trade war there. So when I ship something called white oak, right, a different oak, most of us have red oak in our houses, but if you've seen red or white oak, it's a lightly tan, more tan color. That matches up with European oak very closely. So I'm shipping white oak to Vietnam, they're making it into furniture for all kinds of companies in UK, Spain, France, all over, and that product will keep going. So as long as my customer can handle whatever tariff is on, you know, if their country reciprocates, which at this point doesn't seem like Vietnam's gonna reciprocate, I will still have that business hopefully going. But yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question how long these trade wars can last, who can hang out the longest, what products are going to be hurt the most, right? I mean, if you go back to COVID again, in my opinion, like, man, we lost a lot of manufacturing in this country that makes us a little vulnerable, right? If you think about that, I mean, we didn't have the PPE or any of the medical stuff that they needed in hospitals and everywhere else. A lot of that stuff's being made overseas. So should we be thinking about our own, you know, country and our nation about like what should we be making here? Medicine may be a good example, right? If all our medicine is made abroad and somebody stops that, what does that happen to us if we need that medicine, right? Good question. Others?